that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. So lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell, who is, there we go.
Here we go.
That's famous Tom Fennell, and this week we have...
and that's not Tom Fennell.
We have the equally famous Emily Peyton, who a lot of people know because she has run for governor and been a talkative person in the public forum, talking about hempcrete, among other things. And we will get into that on a separate show, dealing with just that, which hopefully will run for about a week on Channel 8, either this week or next. This week, today being the 17th of August, we will start.
We're talking about the 10th of August.
We'll start talking about the 10th of August. Every day I get up early and spend about 3 or 4 hours just looking at news on energy and climate change. And every time I find an article that I think is interesting, I do a 50 or 55 word synopsis and a link to the original. And I assemble 10 to 15 of those and put them at the website geoharvey.com, Geoharvey. And we will try to keep the viewers aware of what day the articles we're talking about come from, so we can, so they can go to the website, click on the calendar for that date, and find the article.
Well, some of these articles are well worth looking up and talking about.
Some of them are fun.
We don't have time to talk about them all.
Yeah. Some of them are
depth.
Some of them are fun and some of them are scary, but you know, it's kind of like
both.
Some of them are both. Some of them, it depends upon who you are. They can be fun for some people and scary for others.
Easy for some, difficult for others.
Yeah, that's right. So what we're going to start with here is an article from Think Progress.
America's wind energy industry passed a major milestone.
The wind energy industry reached an important milestone in 2016 when it passed the generating capacity of hydroelectric power for the first time to become the nation's top renewable generating source. The total amount of wind capacity in the queue represents 34% of all generating capacity waiting to connect to the grid. Now, one thing I suppose we should mention is that wind capacity is not equal to hydro capacity, because typically onshore wind farms have a lower capacity factor, which means
out of 24 hours, the number of hours that they're actually generating electricity.
Yeah.
Like eight 24ths or 1/3.
Yeah,
it's
wind farms that are extremely, onshore wind farms that are very efficient have capacity factors of around 40%, some of them higher. And a few of them.
Offshore is better.
Yeah, and offshore is better. Offshore can be upwards of 50%, which means that it's comparable. Well, it's above the capacity factor of Chinese coal.
Okay.
Okay. So there you have it.
Well, just for what it's worth, the wind industry supplied about 6% of U.S. electricity in 2016.
Okay.
And all of that was onshore.
6% of the electricity, and hydro was about 8% of the electricity.
I think it was just about that. Yep.
Yeah. So we're getting to a point where actually renewable power, wind, solar, hydro, and so forth, is occasionally producing about equal to or even slightly above what nuclear normally produces.
Yeah.
I think in March we had.
Well, we're seeing rapid progress in technologies. Prices are going down. More and more of it's going to start showing up.
Right. Okay, should we move on?
Let's move on.
You're allowed to speak, Emily, if you want.
I'm saving it for my hour. I'm making notes about
there
what
you
to
go.
remember to bring up. How about that? Then we'll
Smart
get
girl.
through everything.
Wow. Our next item is from etenergyworld.com, which, by the way, I think is an Indian site. It has very good. The writers, I think, are American, but the site, I think, is Indian.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
The Indians are doing some interesting stuff, as we will soon find out.
Some of the stuff going on in India is amazing.
Well, let's talk about this one. Amid fading oil boom, Canada's roughnecks seek green energy jobs. And roughnecks, for those who don't know, aren't street thugs.
My mother thought they were.
These are the guys that work in the oil fields.
Since oil prices collapsed in 2014, Canada has lost more than 40,000 jobs in oil, gas, and related industries, according to data released last year by the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. Thousands of employees of fossil fuels businesses left homeless following a plunge in oil prices are finding work with solar or wind energy. We have another item that's on the same thing. We will be talking more about it.
A lot of these skills are transferable.
Yeah, like welding.
Absolutely.
Which, you know, when I read that coal miners were getting work in wind farms as welders, I thought, what? But a lot of coal miners are welders.
Well, there's a lot of welding going on underground.
You don't think about that.
No.
You know, I think of being underground, you're just talking about Tommy knockers.
Tommy
Oh,
knockers?
yeah.
Do you know about Tommy
No, I
knockers?
don't know about Tommy knockers.
There was a mine in California that closed, and the miners refused to leave the mine until the mining company would guarantee the safety of the Tommy knockers. The Tommy knockers are the wee folk who inhabit mines.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Tommy knockers.
Yeah.
And what did they have to do to get?
I don't remember. I think they had to perform some ceremony to release them to another mine or something.
Who wrote the book called The Tommy Knockers?
I don't know.
A well-known author. Very well-known.
I don't know. Do you?
I can't remember.
No.
Tommy
Senior
Knockers.
moment.
I'll look it up.
Emily's going to look it up. Okay. Should we move on?
Well, there's a quick takeaway here
Okay.
because it shows you part of what's going on. Canada, the government of Canada supplied $3 billion annually in financial backing and government subsidies for oil, gas, and coal companies between 2013 and 2015, compared to $171 million for clean energy.
Now, what were the two
$3 billion
figures?
versus $171 million.
So, you know, that tells you who needs money the most.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I noticed, by the way, that the Trump White House had somebody in it who was talking about how the fossil fuels industry should be getting some kind of
Well,
financial
they need more
support.
subsidies. Yeah, they definitely need more subsidies. They're brand new, you know, new kid on the block.
Yeah, well, okay.
We got a nice picture coming
We
up
do
here.
indeed. We have a picture. Well, it's not all that nice a picture,
Well,
but it's
it's a
kind
nice
of scary.
picture of a not nice thing.
Yes, it is. And this is from Clean Technica.
Greenland experiencing an exceptional number of wildfires this year.
Yeah. By the way, we're still on Friday, August 10th. So if you go to geoharvey.com and click on the 10th on the calendar, you can get to this article.
And that's an aerial photograph of Greenland.
Right. Wildfires can happen even in Greenland. They are very rare there, but unfortunately they have become more common. This year has been unprecedented as far as numbers of fires go. This is particularly bad as wildfires release soot, and soot has been deposited on ice sheets or snow, and this greatly increases the speed at which the ice melts.
You can sort of get an idea of what Greenland looks like by that picture. I'll bring it up again.
Okay.
And interesting thing about Greenland is practically no trees there.
Yeah.
So what's burning here is pucker brush.
Yeah. Which, by the way,
Grasslands, willows.
yeah, the willows are trees, but they're
Little
so
bitty
short.
guys, yeah.
They're so short they barely qualify as shrubs. They're like 6 inches tall.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, but they spread. They go up,
That
and
must be
whatever the way the
darling.
prevailing wind blows, they kind of trail in that direction. They're like natural bonsai.
They're like wee people. Wee
Yes.
willows.
We can give
The
each
Tommy knocker.
willow a Tommy knocker to guard it. Okay. The Tommy knockers, by the way, warned the miners if there was going to be a collapse.
So are these Tommy, I'm going aside and
That's okay.
I'm promising
Go
to
ahead.
wait till later, but are they invisible to some, invisible to some?
I don't know. I've never heard of anybody actually seeing one. But they are very well known and respected among miners
Underground miners.
whose ancestors or who came from Wales or Cornwall.
I think we had one here.
What?
I think we had one here.
We had a gremlin in the studio earlier. Okay, should we move on here, Tom?
Yeah, Friday the 11th.
Friday the 11th, and we've got an item from Clean Technica again.
India's recent 500 megawatt rooftop solar auction sees a lowest bid of 3.4 cents per kilowatt hour.
India has auctioned the largest capacity of rooftop solar power projects in history. The results are extremely promising and could provide a boost for rooftop solar market. In an auction of just over 503 megawatts of rooftop solar capacity, bids ranged from $1.01 per watt to $1.16.6 per watt, with tariffs ranging from 3.4 cents per kilowatt hour to 7.1 cents per kilowatt hour.
Just to eliminate some of the confusion here, the bids have to do with what it costs to build this thing per
Yes.
watt.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Thanks.
And the kilowatt hours, of course, are the wholesale prices they can sell it for.
Yes.
And just for the heck of it, in Green Mountain Power here today, residential rate is 14.84 cents per kilowatt hour.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And so
3.4 is what was it?
3.4 cents.
But
Yeah.
that's a
That's a wholesale rate.
That's a wholesale
So they're
price.
selling to somebody who in turn is selling it to the Indian
Right.
people.
When Vermont Yankee was trying to sell electricity to Green Mountain Power, to the state of Vermont, I'm sorry, and they said they had an offer too
Something
good.
like 6 cents
good
per
Cheap
cent.
to
It was
meter.
6.5 cents.
That was too cheap.
And the
to me.
cheapest rate at which Vermonters were buying on the wholesale market, in which Vermont utilities were buying, was 3.5 cents, and that was from, I think that was from a biodigester. But yeah, these are very low. They're higher, significantly higher than the lowest solar bids that have come, because we've had solar bids that are below 3 cents per kilowatt hour. But these are the lowest for India, certainly. And another thing too is the $1.01 a watt.
Yeah.
Those of us who have been watching know about the DOE's project called Sunshot Initiative. Their goal by 2020 is to hit $1 a watt.
We're almost there.
Almost there. That's right.
India's coming up again. They're doing
India
some
is-
interesting things
India
in
is
India.
coming up again.
Yeah.
And this is from ETEnergyWorld.com again.
The same company, yeah.
Yeah.
They said they were Indian.
I believe it's an Indian website, but I think that the writers are writing, who write for it are, they're either English or American, or they are Indians who have been educated in India, or England, or the United States, because
Many
they're,
Indians are fluent in English.
oh yeah,
Very-
many of them,
yeah.
but they write in a
This is
style
sort
of
of stilted
English.
English. Yeah,
Well,
different style.
that's the way we see it.
Yeah.
They want, Americans want to copy Hemingway. They want to have things said in the fewest words possible. The Indians do exactly the opposite. They want to use the longest conceivable words and as many of them as they can.
Sometime I'll tell you about the time I had a drink with Hemingway. Well, we're back in India again.
Okay.
Over threefold jump in India's solar capacity in the past 2 years.
India's total installed solar power generation capacity grew over threefold to 13,652 megawatts over the past 2 fiscal years, the country's energy minister said. He also stated that the government has revised the national solar mission target of grid-connected solar power. That's a title, by the way. National Solar Mission Target of the Grid-Connected Solar Power.
There's no vowels.
from 20,000 megawatts by 2022 to 100,000 megawatts by 2022. They've multiplied it by 5.
Yeah.
And 100,000 megawatts? What is that?
That's a little bit.
That's a lot. That's like saying,
100 gigs.
It's 100 gigawatts, which means that it's like, well, I'm gonna say that's like 30 nuclear power plants, maybe.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
So that's a lot of energy.
Well, the cumulative solar energy capacity has increased 364%.
The cumulative.
Installed,
Yeah. Okay.
what's there already,
Okay.
has gone up since 2015.
Okay.
364%.
Okay. So should we move on?
Let's move on.
We've got an
Let's move on.
item
We're going
from-
to have to leave India, though.
Offshore Oil and Gas Magazine still on Friday, the 11th
Got a
of
picture
August.
coming up.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah,
There it
here we
is.
go. And where is that?
Oh, it's well,
They don't-
the picture is where is this?
Homestad. It looks like it's somewhere over in
It's Denmark. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Dong. Dong did this.
Okay.
Danish Oil and Natural Gas.
So tell me, what is 2,000 gigawatts? How much would that power a city? I mean, give me an idea of the scale.
When Yankee closed, before they rebuilt Yankee, it was doing a half a gigawatt.
Half a gigawatt. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and so
They
so-
bumped it up about 20%.
Yeah,
and then they
and,
closed.
and I think of a modern nuclear plant as being about 1 gigawatt.
gigawatt, yep.
But a nuclear plant will outproduce a solar plant by a factor of maybe 4 or 5. It depends. But so
Because it's on 24/7.
yeah, well,
For a month.
whether you like it or not,
Yeah.
they're not exactly flexible. Okay, this is Offshore Oil and Gas Magazine. And thank you for asking that, Emily, because there were probably people who wondered.
Oil companies' position for emerging offshore wind sector. Why am I not surprised?
Yeah, oil and gas operators are positioning for a potential growth of U.S. offshore wind projects. The U.S. could generate more than 2,000 gigawatts of offshore wind power, Stephanie McClellan with the University of Delaware said at Renewable Energy World's inaugural Offshore Wind Executive Summit. Statoil and Dong, that's Danish Oil and Natural Gas, may invest in the U.S. Now,
Statoil is Norwegian. Dong is
Statoil,
Danish.
yes,
Yep.
and Dong is an acronym for
And they're
Danish
both into the North
Oil and
Sea,
Natural
heavy.
Gas. Both. But of course, there's so much development that can be done in the United States, and much of this stuff is even out of sight of land. So,
Oh, we've just started cracking the surface.
Yeah.
In another 20 years, the Atlantic coast shelf there is going to be loaded with wind.
And
just
what
because it makes economic sense.
what I said earlier about 2,000 gigawatts, I was referring to solar. This is offshore wind. And offshore wind, a gigawatt of offshore wind is approximately equal to half a gigawatt of nuclear. So, or even a little more than half.
because it's intermittent.
Well, but offshore wind has a very high capacity factor compared to onshore wind. So 2,000 gigawatts of offshore is like 1,000 nuclear power plants. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
Quite
It
a
is.
bit.
Yeah. Moving on, Tom.
Yeah, I think we've covered this one.
We've got an item here from 7 days.
We're coming back. We're coming back home, folks.
We are indeed.
Let's get this one. Environmentalists object to Scott climate panel choice. This is an interesting article. It's local, and it's surprising.
And it's an article that almost everybody avoided. Vermont Governor Phil Scott's Climate Advisory Commission hasn't even held its first meeting, but it's already taken a step that may alienate a broad swath of Vermont's environmental community. The Commission's technical advisory group will have Annette Smith, vociferous critic of wind turbines, as its co-chair. And you know, there were people who refused to serve
Oh
on
yeah,
this
that's just
board
one of the
because
things
she
this
was
article
going to be on
mentions
it.
is 3 prominent people who declined to serve, and why they declined to serve, and what they have to say about it.
Well, Annette Smith says she has vast experience.
Yeah, I heard
So-
that was in the article.
It's in the article. Annette Smith has also told me that, you know, I pointed out to some anti-wind people that the Audubon Society had been bought off by Big Wind, and she said I pointed out that they had backed Cape Wind, and she pointed out that they had been bought off by Big Wind, and you know I. How do you know this? Where do you?
She got
where do
vast
you-
experience.
She has vast experience, and honestly, I think there are people in this world who kind of. I shouldn't say anything. I'll just leave
Well,
it.
one of the guys who won't serve on this committee is a UVM professor of ecological economics.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is what he's saying. I don't think Annette Smith as co-chair would be even-handed given her public record. Her advocacy has been against renewable energy.
Of all kinds, as a
Of
matter
all
of fact,
kinds, yeah.
and people point out that her house is off grid and dependent on solar power, but she has
But
made.
she still doesn't like solar.
She doesn't like
Bush is the same way, wasn't he?
What?
He had a whole compound that was totally renewable before he began the Iraq War. And Bush, yeah.
Yeah, well, some of these things are kind of difficult to figure out.
Or still does have it.
The takeaway from this article is, look out, hot potato coming through.
Yeah, right. It's difficult for me to imagine but you know, it makes me think of the people who resigned from the president's, what was that commission? It just happened. It just happened.
It was the Council of Merchants. What it was, some sort of...
And Donald Trump found out that one of those councils disbanded itself formally, and the other one was kind of hanging there, and so he just said he was disbanding both. Yeah. And since the president disbands something that had already disbanded itself, I think that makes a statement about his leadership abilities.
He doesn't get mad; he gets even.
Yeah, right.
Well,
I think he gets both.
Got another
All right, we are up
here.
to Saturday, August 12th, and you can go to geoharvey.com and click on Saturday.
We got a picture coming up.
August 12th. If you want to see this, this is a picture of an abandoned bait shop at the Salton Sea.
The Salton Sea is interesting because it's terribly polluted, very, very salty. Fish grow in it, but it's about the size of Lake Champlain without the Champlain Islands. It's a big lake.
It's a big lake. Well, when it's not too dry. When it's not too dry.
Well, yeah, it goes up and down with the climate.
Yeah. This is from Think Progress. Have you got a title? I
do. Sandia tests Salton sea-grown algae as a new fuel source. They look like they've got some lemons in there making lemonade out of it.
The wind energy industry reached an important milestone in 2016 when it passed the generating capacity of hydroelectric for the first time. And you know I'm reading the wrong one here, so I have to find the right one. Okay, here we go. I'm almost there. Oh, here we go. Sandia National Laboratories is testing whether one of the largest and most polluted lakes in California can be transformed into one of the most productive and prolific. The 350 square mile Salton Sea has high levels of nitrogen and phosphorus from agricultural runoff. Some algae that thrive there in these conditions can be used to make biofuel.
Well, Sandia intends to harness algae's penchant for prolific growth, specific kinds of algae, to clean up these pollutants while creating a renewable domestic source of fuel.
You know, it's interesting because Lake Champlain has algae growths for exactly the same reason.
Yep.
And what they're doing down there is they're gathering the algae. They may even be promoting specific species of algae.
They are, yeah.
But they're doing that to get the phosphorus out of the lake. Now, Lake Champlain has Green Mountain Power putting up biodigesters along it, as I recall, to reduce the amount of phosphorus in the lake by 35%.
I'm not too familiar with what you're talking about, but yeah, I've heard something like that.
Yeah. So anyway, that picture was a picture of a bait shop which had long since closed down, which was why it looked kind of abandoned. It was abandoned.
Interesting picture in this article. Part of the solution here is a unique way of biodigestion.
Yes.
And it's doing it on a flat surface with a tarp over it. And the tarp is billowing around, and they say that it's like walking on a trampoline. Very interesting. Yeah. I couldn't really figure out how the heck they're doing it and what they're doing, but they know what they're doing, I'm sure.
I'm sure they do. Our next item comes from Utility Dive, which is kind of an interesting name for a publication, but there it is.
I've wondered about that too.
Well, the reason is because they always put everything up in 3 bullet points, and then they dive into the.
Is that it?
I'm sure that's what it is.
I can believe that.
Yeah. And they always have a very short synopsis of the article.
Yeah, which they do. Right.
Which sometimes I don't use when I use their stuff. I go into the article itself.
Okay, so the clock starts on integrating carbon pricing in the New York market.
This is interesting. This
is like the stock exchange, isn't it?
I suppose. Last month, the New York Independent System Operator's CEO told a House subcommittee that it planned to integrate a price on carbon into its market dispatch within 3 years after the Brattle Group published a report on potential market impacts. The Brattle Group has released the report, so the clock has started on carbon pricing in New York.
Well, it's an idea whose time has come because the producers of the energy aren't paying for the social costs of carbon.
Yes.
And this carbon tax, which is
Yes.
what they're talking about without using the word,
Yes.
is a step in the right direction.
And
to
the social costs of carbon are very,
well, we'll be
very
talking about
high.
that coming up.
Yeah.
It is very high.
Yeah.
Oh, we've talked about it before.
Yeah, we have. So should we go on?
Clock starts on. Well, I read that one.
You did.
Did you read? You didn't read the rest of it though. Did you?
Yes, I did, I believe.
Duh.
Talked about the Brattle Group.
Brattleboro.
What's next? It comes from
Okay,
Renews.
the next one we got another picture.
Give you a clue. It comes from Renews.
Got another
And it's
picture.
got a picture of offshore wind from Renews.
How clever.
The Renews articles, by the way, for those who are interested, are always very short.
Yes. Yes.
There have been times when my synopsis of the article was almost the entire article.
Well, Paris goal needs North Sea surge.
The growth in deployment of offshore wind in Europe must triple if countries are to have any chance of meeting the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement, a study has said. Research by a joint team from Ecofis and parent company Navigant found that 45% of Europe's power requirements would need to come from offshore wind to meet the target. 45% is a lot.
Sure is.
Yeah, but
It's doable.
as they're developing floating offshore wind, they're going to be able to do more of this. They can get into areas that they would not have got into. Yeah.
Well, let's move along to Sunday the 13th,
Sunday the 13th, we have an item from Domain B,
whatever that is.
whatever that is.
Renewable power generation hits a record high in the UK.
Records are being set in the UK. There is not a single major plant generating purely there was not a single plant generating solar power in 2007, but now there are 277 of them.
Wow.
The current UK target calls for 30% of the electricity generated from renewable sources by 2020. According to the provisional figures, the number in the first 3 months for the first 3 months of 2017 was 26.6%.
Yeah.
So they're almost there.
Yeah, you know, I can't figure these numbers from the UK. Sometimes they say they're way behind, and sometimes they say, well, we're working on it, we're doing it. And I just don't get it.
Well, that's how they motivate themselves.
Is it?
Yeah, and you see, this is probably a sunny day. You don't have the photo up there, but the picture here has got a lot of cloud. I mean, UK isn't known for its sunniness either.
No, it's not. Although they get a lot of, during the summer they get a lot of sun because they're so far north. Then during the winter they don't get the sun because they're so far north.
Interesting quick takeaway here. For the first time on the 7th of June of this year, wind, nuclear, and solar together were generating more than gas and coal combined.
Yes. Well, coal in the UK is almost dead.
Almost dead.
Almost completely dead. I mean, coal may generate 2 or 3% of the power. Should we move on?
Got another picture.
Got a
coming up.
picture in New Mexico.
Oh, I thought that was the UK.
No,
Obviously not.
that's-
I thought it was the
well,
Moors or something.
Huh? You thought what?
Well, I was wondering if that was out in Scotland or something.
This could be anywhere.
It
but
could be
happens
in
to
Wales.
Mexico.
They have little teeny mountains in Wales, but they look tall.
Especially if you're lying down.
No, actually, they do look tall. You can have a mountain that looks like it's in the Alps, beautiful shape like the Matterhorn, and at
it's only
the
little
base of it is a house that looks like if it were on the Matterhorn, it would be 500 feet tall, but it's in Wales, where the mountains are short, but short compared to the Alps. Let me put it that way. Especially a person who's ever watched The Englishman who went up the hill and came down the mountain would know that.
Is that a movie?
It was a movie that had Hugh Grant in it.
Is it funny?
It's very funny, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, what do we got here? This is from Taos News, Tom.
Let's get us all up here first. This is from Taos News,
Taos
New
News, that's
Mexico.
right.
Kit Carson Co-op, 1 megawatt solar array comes online in Tres Piedras.
A 1 megawatt solar array in Tres Piedras in New Mexico started soaking in the sun and pumping out the power to the grid last week. The Kit Carson Electric Cooperative announced plans earlier this year to eventually provide its 30,000 members with 100% renewable energy. The Tres Piedras solar array is the first of 7 the co-op plans to build this year alone.
Well,
And-
they're planning to build 35 small solar arrays
Yeah.
within 5 years.
And you know, they had to spend a lot of money to get out of their contract
Yeah,
with
yeah.
a grid in order to be able to put these solar plants in and get them
talked about
going.
that,
Yeah,
yeah.
we did about a year ago, I think and the amount of money was atrocious. It was
Pull it up again.
millions of dollars.
If you notice, that those are carports.
Yes, they are. You can see the car under one
Yeah,
of them.
clever idea.
It is, and I don't know how effective those panels would be in dealing with rain, because the rain would come down at the edges of the panels in the middle of the array. I
And
would
there's
guess
no gutters there. It's interesting.
There's no gutters,
'Cause it's
but
the-
it will keep the car cool.
Yes, which is very important in Taos, New Mexico.
Yes, it is. Okay, should we move on?
Yeah, we're coming back closer to home.
Closer to home, southcoasttoday.com.
No subsidies for Pilgrim in emission rules.
The clean energy standard developed by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection and the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs, there is the equivalent of an Indian title in Massachusetts, for length. It qualifies only zero carbon producers that become operational after December 31st, 2010 for energy credits. The Pilgrim nuclear plant is too old to get any subsidies. If they had subsidies, they might be willing to stay open longer. They've already announced that they're closing down.
They've announced a closing date, yep.
Yep. I used to live in Plymouth. It's kind of a confusing town. There are streets in Plymouth that were laid out in the 17th century.
Okay,
And you can tell by looking at them.
The cows did them. They were just driving the cows. They were always behind the cows. That's what happened in Boston. So the cows would make a turn and the person would follow.
Okay, we are up to Monday, the 14th of August.
And we got another picture coming up.
We have a picture. This is an interesting
kinda
little
cute.
guy.
Yeah.
This is from Gizmodo, Australia.
Tiny Tesla house tours Australia.
A tiny Tesla house is on tour of Australia, showing off the Powerwall and educating the public on how to generate, store, and use renewable energy. Ah, yes. And the tiny house is towed by a Tesla Model X. The tiny house is completely powered by renewable energy, courtesy of a 2 kilowatt solar power system and a Powerwall battery, which you can see on the outside of the house there.
Well, that house is 20 feet by 7 feet
That's
20
very
feet.
small.
by 13 feet high.
By 13 feet high, which in a structure like that means you probably have a loft inside it to sleep in.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
In this particular solar house, it's not for living. It's got a design studio. It's got some hardware, some software. You can calculate your own home's needs. And there's a Tesla staff there to answer questions. It's a pretty clever
But the
little
Tesla
thing.
staff doesn't live in the tiny site.
No, he doesn't live in a house. They put him up in a hotel.
Okay. And we have a picture for the next one, too,
Let's
which
get
is
us back here.
get us back here. We're back to
And-
North America. This is from Huffington Post, Canada.
We got a picture on this one coming up.
Which,
Wind turbines in Alberta.
are we doing last year
I-
California's 1.4 million dairy cows?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'd like
yeah.
you to do
We do
that
this
one.
every week.
Yeah,
Emily, just-
yeah.
okay, this is from Triple Pundit.
Yeah. Do we want to see these windmills or?
Well, we
yeah,
don't
we do
not-
because it's
eventually-
more pertinent than the next one.
If it-
Well, we could do it for both.
Well, let's
Let me do the windmills, and we'll do it for both. The windmills, those windmills are in Alberta, but that's okay. Let's talk about the dairy cows. Triple Pundit. What's the title?
Competition fierce for manure-to-energy projects in California's dairy industry.
Last year, California's 1.4 million dairy cows fell under statewide mandate to find a way to curb their environmental footprint in order to achieve the state's goal to reduce methane emissions 40% from 2013 levels by 2030. The state government says now it is receiving more applications for anaerobic digesters than it can currently fund.
Now, we've got a little bit of this going on in Vermont, right? You're
Yeah.
a cow power.
Well,
customer.
we had 16 anaerobic digesters in Vermont before California got its first
Got
one.
first one.
But you can bet your bottom dollar they're going to outstrip Vermont very fast.
They probably have already.
They may have actually already because they're moving on this.
Well, this is a great idea because it takes a product that nobody wants and turns it into a product that everybody wants.
You know, one of the best books I've read was a book that I think was called Garbage. And it was about the history of garbage in the United States.
Okay.
Waste, just waste.
Yeah.
And the way they used to deal with waste in New York City was to throw it out on the
dumped it out
street
into
and
the
let
sea,
the
yeah.
pigs eat it. Now you can imagine what health was like in New York City at the time. And then they developed this thing where I think it was Rikers Island was a waste dump. And the waste built up, and then what would happen is you'd have waste burning, and then you'd also have in other parts waste digesting. And every once in a while, the whole thing would just explode. So you didn't want to be on Rikers Island. Seriously.
So now it's a prison.
Yeah, and then they also had waste. They decided that they were going to get rid of the waste in a way which is much more healthy for the city by putting it in barges and taking
bringing
it
it
out
out
and
to sea.
dumping it in the sea.
Yep.
And unfortunately for the people who were on the beaches in Brooklyn, what they did was they had a hole in a dock.
That was before feminine products were created.
I think it was actually
Oh, my God.
continued after then. I mean, it continued into rather modern times. They had this hole in a dock, and they would dump the waste through it. And there was supposed to be a barge down there, but there wasn't always a barge. I mean, and this stuff, you know, from 70,000 pigs on one farm. You build what are called euphemistically lagoons, which birds would come to, and they would say, a lake, I can land in that.
Oh, wow.
And they would land in it and die.
There's lagoons in Vermont still.
Yeah,
Little mini ones.
and you find things like that at chemical plants, or at least you did when I was in chemical plants. And, you know, the plant owner was a very wildlife conscious individual who was just saddened enormously every time he saw some little bird fly over the lagoon, get overcome by the gases and fall in. So
But these anaerobic digesters are the way of the future.
they are. Did I read the thing for that? I don't think I did.
Well,
Didn't you just do
I
that?
thought I did. I thought I did.
Read it again.
No, I think I read that. 40% reduction. I did read it. Okay.
Okay.
Now we're up to wind turbines in Alberta, and this
Now
is
we
from
got this.
Huffington Post,
show the picture
Canada.
again. I showed it briefly. We should
Yes,
again.
that's okay.
Come on,
We can
you-
see it again. It's up there.
And this is actually a repeat of an article we covered earlier. Same article, different source.
Well, it has much of the same information, but it also has
it
additional
was the same
information.
author and everything.
Oh, was it? I didn't know that.
Archibald or Archambault.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
know how
I
you
missed
pronounce
that.
it. Alberta's oil workers are shifting to renewable energy jobs.
Yes, Alberta produces 80% of Canada's oil, but as oil prices have dropped, there have been layoffs, and unemployment rate in the once booming province stands at nearly 8%. Now, Alberta's renewable energy capacity is doubling every 2 years, and interest in green energy training has been growing swiftly. And that's the additional thing. It's not just about workers getting jobs, but it's about people in the government, in the industry, and so forth, setting up facilities for training people.
Does this have to do with the tar sands? Where
Yeah,
are the tar?
it's
You
the
know,
tar
the tar
sands.
sands. So a lot of the protests and the awareness has
And
come to roost.
And the Keystone XL pipeline, they're having trouble finding organizations that are set to produce oil from the tar sands who want to ship through the pipeline.
They're as bad as a pervert in a schoolyard. They're terrible.
As
They're
a what
terrible.
in a schoolyard?
A pervert in a schoolyard. I mean, for the earth. They are terrible.
They're awful. They're absolutely awful. We have to eliminate the fossil fuels industry. And that's why we've got the government in Washington that we do, because the fossil fuels industry has got people in it who are saying the only way we can get through the next quarter's bottom line with a positive figure, I'm guessing, is to make sure that we've got the support of the people in Washington. So they put $1 billion into buying themselves a political party. They leveraged the right wing of the Republican Party into possession of the party, which they leveraged into the possession of the Congress, which they leveraged into control of the government.
Yeah, but hooray for Standing Rock, and hooray for the campuses that are divesting.
And
It's,
hooray for a lot of people.
Yep.
But
Money is speech.
It reminds me very much of Hetty Green, you
Yeah.
know, who would set up a company. she would get a company, and then she'd sell 49% of the stock. Then she would take that 51% and set up a holding company and sell 49% of the stock. And then she'd take that holding company and set up another holding company and sell 49% of the stock. And she
still had
wound up
control.
owning not the railroad and the mines and the steel yards, but she owned the property that controlled them.
Right.
So she could say, "You buy your
I could learn a
transportation
thing.
from here." Well,
Is it legal?
it's not legal anymore.
Yeah.
It was because of Hetty Green that they made it illegal. Thank you to the people of Putney for putting. Was it
thought she
Putney?
was from
Bellows
Bellows
Falls.
Falls, yeah.
That's where it was. People of Bellows Falls for allowing Hetty Green to take over their name.
Well, moving back home here,
Moving back home.
a huge climate opportunity if RGGI governors step up. And RGGI stands for the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative.
The governors of 9 northeastern and mid-Atlantic states are about to make a momentous decision how much they will cut power plant pollution and how fast they will cut it. Big carbon cuts could add $3.2 billion to state coffers and reduce air pollution. This is from the Natural Resources Defense Council, and it relates, among other things, to the idea of a carbon tax in Vermont.
Yes, it's leading. That's inevitable eventually.
Eventually.
Hey,
You said...
you make a mess, you got to clean it up.
Well, yeah, and you know, this brings us back to that thing that came from the American Lung Association, California, which
Yeah.
did. All of those states were among the states. Well, not all of them. There were 9 here, but they studied. Well, maybe they were. They studied 9 states, and
Well, I'll tell you who the RGGI is.
Well,
It's
yeah.
Delaware and Maryland, all the way up to north to Maine. All of those states in between, except Jersey and Pennsylvania.
Right. And then in the American Lung Association looked at those states because they all have similar laws regarding emissions for transportation, and Oregon and California and Washington, I guess. And so it might have been 12 states. I was thinking it was 10 for some reason. It might have been 10. But at any rate, of those states, the social cost in terms of health for carbon emissions in transportation is highest in Vermont. Believe it or not.
I do believe it.
Despite our
I
clean
think it's
air.
because of the way the population is distributed. In
Exactly.
Vermont.
It's because
You gotta
Vermonters
drive a lot.
drive a lot. And the
wood,
cost,
Wood too, wood smoke.
well, but that's not transportation. This is
Okay.
just transportation. And the cost of transportation in terms of health effects was $330 million for the state, which is $480 per person per year. Which means that if you take that 47% and say that's $480 and you extrapolate it, you're coming to a figure that is $1,000 roughly for health effects of our use of fossil fuels in Vermont. And that's per person. So if you have a family of 5, you're losing $5,000 a year. And that's masked by the cost of health insurance, no wonder it's high, and taxes.
Well, this RGGI program doesn't affect transportation.
Yeah.
It's about power production.
But it does affect, we are
It's
talking
been
about
very effective.
Yeah, if we deal with carbon emissions, in general, we'll be dealing with carbon emissions.
We're eventually going to have to deal
And
with
one of the
that.
things that's really interesting is that one of the plans for dealing with carbon emissions is to eliminate the sales tax.
Yeah.
And what would
That's a
that do?
sweetener, that's
What
all.
would do that? But what would that do for Brattleboro? It wouldn't do much for Montpelier or Barrie, but it would do a lot for Brattleboro because
Yeah,
it would
'cause
mean that-
everybody's moving
Why would
across
you go
the-
to
the
Why would you
Haystack.
go to New Hampshire if there's
Yeah.
no sales tax in Brattleboro?
Yeah.
Or at the very least, remove sales tax on Vermont-made items.
Well, I'm not sure we could do that.
Oh.
I think somebody would sue for interference with interstate trade. It
Well,
might-
somebody's going to sue it.
It's not a bad idea if we can do it. You know.
Well, people are thinking about stuff like this.
Yeah,
That's,
I mean,
that's a good sign.
you know, Emily. Honestly, we could just declare independence and go from there.
And there's people
But
talking
not
about
until
that
we
too.
have our bank together. We've got to have a means of
Yeah, right.
the exchanges.
Well, I hope we don't put it all together and use bitcoins. There's
Well, we got
something that's-
another
Well,
picture coming
look
up
at
here.
this.
Okay, we have
This
a
is
picture.
one of the prettiest pictures we've had.
Ah, yeah, isn't it beautiful? And you know, you can actually see the village in this picture. It's about it's not quite halfway up that river on the west on the
That's the
far
village,
side.
yeah, okay,
That's a
I
little
can see it,
village.
yeah.
And it doesn't look like much, but it's hardly a surprise because only 80 people live there. This is from BC Local News. Got a title, Tom?
I do, and I can't pronounce the word.
Okay.
Wikinooks.
Wikinooks. Well, let's call it Wikinooks.
Wikinooks Nation receives funding for run-of-river hydro project.
I'm glad you invented that because pronunciation because I like it.
Well,
Residents,
you have to be a Native American to pronounce it right.
I don't know. Residents of a remote community in the central coast of British Columbia got funding to build a run-of-river hydroelectric plant. The Wikinooks village on the banks of the Wankoot. This is W-A-N-U-K-V. How do you pronounce it?
It's unpronounceable.
Okay. Wanuk River has about 80 people in it. It's accessible only by float plane or boat, and so life is challenging, and it's dependent on fossil fuel. And you know, in that picture, if you look at the far lake, and you
Yeah.
look at the near shore of the far lake, there is something there that looks to me like it might be a landing strip for a plane that doesn't have floats. So I think maybe this article's fibbing. But they have been dependent on diesel, and it is expensive.
Well, they're going to be able to produce about 90% of the electricity they're now using through
And-
this hydro plant.
And the run
Such a
of
big improvement.
run of river hydro does not
No dams.
no dams. It does
Yep.
not prevent fish from going by, and some of them do no damage to the fish at all. Should we move on?
I think we shall.
Renews has its next item.
Wind Alliance backs New York offshore.
A coalition of business, environmental, and community leaders has backed Governor Andrew Cuomo's plan to make offshore wind the focus of New York's renewable energy plan. The New York Offshore Wind Alliance voiced its support for developing green energy off the state's coastline ahead of a series of public meetings. And that's all we know about that.
I'm trying to come out here. The meetings are part of a process to create an offshore wind master plan to aid Governor Cuomo's commitment to having 50% of New York's power generation by renewable energy sources by 2030.
And you know what? I bet they don't do it
Why?
because they get jumped by wind farm developers who get there ahead of them. They will try to set a standard, and the wind developers will set it for them by just doing what they do.
So it's going to get done no matter who does it.
I think it will. Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
you're right.
I think that they
Economics
could.
are going to be going to dictate.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, should we go on? We've
Yeah,
got
let's stay here in this week. So Wednesday
Okay.
the 16th.
We are up to Wednesday the 16th,
got a
and we
picture
have
here.
a picture,
And it's up already.
And it's up already. And this is from the Rochester City newspaper. Imagine a newspaper having the word newspaper in its title.
How clever.
Okay.
Rochester moving on energy program.
A year or so from now, electric customers in Rochester, New York will have easy access to 100% renewable energy at a price lower than their current rates.
Wow.
The mayor is preparing legislation stating the city's intent to pursue community choice aggregation, which would let the city negotiate an energy supply contract.
The city would then buy power from a chosen supplier.
Yep.
Very much what is happening today in Greenfield.
In Greenfield, yeah,
Yep.
which
It's
we've talked
very
about
similar,
a lot.
yeah.
We've talked about it a lot. And in Greenfield, the people, I guess for what, about 2 years now, have been able
2
to
or 3 years, yep.
yeah, they've been able to get 100% renewable energy as the standard. They can opt out of that plan if they're
And it
willing.
costs you a little bit more.
If you're paying a little bit extra, you can get some of your
Somehow that doesn't
electricity
make
from
sense.
fossil. Well, the fossil fuels and nuclear, particularly nuclear, it's so expensive. It's just ridiculous. That's why Vermont Yankee is shutting down.
we can talk about it. We want to get through this, but
No, we only have one
The
item.
cost of
Emily
nuclear
wants to
is-
get on to talking
wanna
about
go one
hempcrete.
item
no, I
Right.
want to get
don't-
on to talking about all the points that you made so far.
Okay, our next item and our last item, also on Wednesday the 16th, is from AlterNet.
U.S. wind and solar boom helps prevent 12,700 deaths in a single year. We've talked about this before. Same number.
We have. It's a study from the University of California, Berkeley gives us more reason to move from fossil fuels to renewable energy. The study says the U.S. wind and solar power boom has helped prevent premature deaths of thousands of people and has saved the country billions of dollars in health care and climate-related costs in a single year. And that's at the low level of energy use that we've got from renewable sources.
Well, this says it right here. Unhealthful levels of air pollution can put people at risk for premature death and other serious health effects, like lung cancer, asthma, cardiovascular damage, and developmental and reproductive harm. But unlike fossil fuels, wind and solar power systems have no associated air pollution emissions.
Well, I was going to just inject that the cost of nuclear has not been including the cost of caring for the waste for, how many
Never.
umpteen years. Never has.
It never has.
Nuclear is, right from the beginning, has been terribly subsidized.
Right,
Whoops.
right,
I
right.
mean, without government subsidies, called Price-Anderson, I think it is,
Right.
there wouldn't be any nuclear plants because they can't borrow the money.
And that's the insurance.
That's the
insurance,
insurance.
right.
policy.
But then in addition to that, you've got the
The waste,
The-
and you got just mining it to begin with.
yes.
And, yep.
It's not as innocuous as some people make
Well,
it to be.
one of the things that I've found dealing with numbers, doing my blog, doing the stuff that I did before the blog, is that certain industries, you can count on it. If they say, this is going to be there on the 1st of January and it's going to cost no more than X amount of dollars, on the 1st of January it's there and it doesn't cost more than X amount of dollars, normally. And in the wind industry and the solar industry, if something comes in later over budget, that is very much the exception.
But is
But-
it there for nuclear?
Almost. If it comes in on budget and on time, that's really rare.
It hasn't happened recently. I mean, we're talking way over budget and way late.
Well, in the case of the plants in South Carolina, they've spent billions of dollars and nobody's ever going to get
Right.
anything for it.
Right. And it's going to be what? 40 years of electricity, for what? Thousands of years of care. But yeah, and another point I'd like to
Go
sort
ahead.
of throw out there
Go ahead.
is, and this may be just my own thinking on this, the fear of radiation is kind of like the death by diagnosis that you've heard, is probably a bigger factor in resulting health issues, because we look at the people in Russia at Chernobyl, the old folks, or the people who are now old folks, who stayed there and didn't leave, and they're still chugging along.
Yeah.
And the scientists go back with all their things, and there's these people coming out and offering
the mushrooms that they picked up off the floor of the
they
forest.
found that the genetic makeup wasn't stable there, and particularly the birch trees were now kind of stunted birch bushes. But the people who didn't believe in the dangers of it are surviving. I mean, we don't know.
We don't know how well they're surviving.
Well. Yeah,
but the thing is, one of the things about the nuclear industry that has really bothered me is that they have these studies that they did on the likelihood of a nuclear plant having a meltdown, or what they call a core damage event. And in the early days, they used to say that it was a 1 in 10,000 chance in any given year that any given reactor would have a core damage event. Now, if you think about that, that's not all that good, because it means that if you have 100 reactors, there's a 1 in 100 chance that one of those reactors is going to melt down this year. But
that's kind of scary.
it is. But if you look at the history of the nuclear industry, we've had a little over 500 reactors go online, and we've had 11 reactors that we know of melt down.
And Fukushima is still.
Fukushima is 3 meltdowns.
Yeah.
Chernobyl was 1. 3 Mile Island is 1. Now, most people have heard of those, but there was also one in Fermi which was just outside of Detroit, and one at a place called SRE, which was just outside of, it was in Simi Valley, California, just outside of Los Angeles. Then there were 2 in France at Saint-Laurent,
I believe
different years, different reactors. There was one there was one in Scotland, and I don't remember the name.
I don't think anybody heard about that one.
Yeah, but it happened.
Yeah.
And I'm just talking about commercial reactors that are online here. This doesn't. And then there was one in Czechoslovakia, Jasvenské Bohunice, I think is how it's pronounced. It was, and these are 11 reactors. So what's the chance? It's about 1 in 40. So somebody comes to you in the town you're in and says, we want to build a reactor at your town. And you say, what's the chance? If he's going to speak the truth, he's going to say there's a 1 in 40 chance that this reactor will melt down at some point in its lifetime. And what people would go for that?
Yeah, I mean, this is putting a serious dent in my capacity to feel joyous in this moment. But the Fukushima, from what I hear, is an ongoing problem. And there's people who won't eat produce from California now because it's showing up.
California.
Yeah, because the radiated waters.
Well, they're actually selling produce from Fukushima and other parts of Japan now, and there are people who are refusing to eat that.
But the funguses. I thought you were going to go into funguses.
No.
I mean, funguses show incredible promise as far as absorbing radiation. It's something that we certainly
There are plants that do that.
Explored as much as we could.
As a matter of fact, when I was in college, one of the things that we learned was that there's a species of horsetail, I think it's horsetail, that grows in Scandinavia, which isolates gold. And in some places in Scandinavia where the land was flat and there was a lot of gold mixed into the soil, but it was not possible to mine it, they could flood it, grow these horsetails, harvest them, incinerate them, and capture the gold, and they got like 8 to 10 ounces of gold per acre per year.
That's so cool.
Amazing.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So in the United States, what would we do? We'd scoop up all the soil, run it into a kiln, and get all the gold right away and destroy the countryside.
Yeah.
We're done with energy for today because we've come to the end of our tether.